All right, so for this video, we're going to do another sneak peek episode of the private podcast that I do for all my clients inside the Aesthetic Athlete. So you can listen along, hopefully learn something. Now, this is actually an extension of like a mini workshop that I talked the guys through at our last training day. It's all about your identity and how you can try to upgrade that over time. And I do say this in the actual podcast episode as well, but to be clear here, for me, whenever someone chucked the word around like identity and like upgrade your identity in this way, my gut reaction was to be like, nah, like not interested in all that kind of stuff, too like airy-fairy for me. But as I've got older and kind of given some of this stuff more of a chance and kind of lent into it a little bit more, I've definitely found that I've been able to take far more from it. So whilst you may have had the same kind of gut reaction as what I used to have to this kind of stuff, I urge you to give it a shot. Kind of follow through with what I say. There's a few actions in here that you could actually kind of pause the video throughout and have a crack at, and I know you'll take something from it. But anyway, other than that, enjoy the episode and I'll see you at the end. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Aesthetic Athlete channel, private podcast just for you guys. So today we're going to be talking about the identity upgrade, and it's kind of like an extension of what I spoke a little bit about at the training day for those of you who made it along. But before I go into it, as always, a couple of announcements. So first of all, obviously training day was completed. Thank you to everyone who came along. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send out a small feedback form to all of you guys where you can tell me hopefully how amazing you thought it was, but also any kind of feedback that you think would make the next one even better. All right, I'll keep it short, so really fast for you guys to fill in, but we'd massively appreciate if you could do that. And then also, I haven't forgot about the internal kind of challenge I want to do, so I definitely think we would be looking to start that on the 19th of October probably for 6 weeks. I'll obviously give you guys some more details about that. I'll probably do a video into the WhatsApp group whenever I've decided how we're going to kind of score it and everything. But to give you a little bit of info, I'm definitely thinking it will be based around sort of 3 to 5 sort of key daily actions that you'll need to tick off every single day alongside kind of all the basics. And I think I will score that based off of your compliance score on TrueCoach, which I'll obviously explain to you guys a little bit more about how all of that works nearer at the time. So today we are going into, as I said, the identity upgrade. Now, I think for me, right, before I even go into this, like I've definitely been guilty in the past of hearing a concept or like this, or somebody saying the phrase identity upgrade, and immediately I would switch off and immediately I'd be like, nah, fuck that. That's just like woo-woo fairy shite, not interested. But as I've got a little bit older and as I've like actually allowed myself to think about these kind of things, and I have definitely taken more from these kind of exercises. So if that is your sort of gut reaction, it's exactly what mine used to be. I would just urge you to like give it a chance and try and kind of follow along with this as best you can. And I'm going to ask you to write a few things down in your own time as well. And even if you're, if you're driving or something, at least kind of give it a pause and at least think about what you would write down, because I know that there's definitely a lot you can take away from doing these things. Okay, so as I said, for those of you who are at the training, you'll know roughly what I'm going to say, but I'm going to go into more detail here. So there'll still be plenty for you guys to take away from this as well. All right, so first of all, I think the whole key concept of what I'm going to talk about in this episode is basically, to sum it up in a few words, you have to fake it till you make it. Like, in order to become the person you want to become, you first need to start acting like that person. You need to make decisions they would make. You need to make the choices they would make. When you're presented with, whether it's easy or hard decisions, you need to think along the lines of what would the person that I want to become, what would they choose in this scenario? And I think at first, it will actually be quite difficult and way more conscious. You'll really have to consciously make those decisions. And it sometimes can cost you a lot of energy and a lot of bandwidth to make that decision, because you maybe have so many impulses that make you want to go, the other way. But the more you do it and the more you change your identity over time, the more unconscious those decisions are going to become. And that's kind of what we want, right? And when I say identity here, I don't mean like what you identify as. I more mean like how you see yourself. And to kind of sum this up as well, I think like if I use an example from me, it's almost like how you see yourself and what sort of self narratives you have for yourself. So when I was younger, like when I was a kid, pretty much all throughout school, especially when I was like really young, like under 10. Everyone used to always say, oh yeah, Blair's really shy. Blair's really shy. Oh, like, you know, if I ever went somewhere with my mum and dad and we had met like other parents or that, they're like, oh, don't worry, he's just shy. He's just shy. And it's almost like that got like drilled into my head that like I identified to myself as like, oh, I'm shy. Like that's one of my character traits. And it was just like constantly reinforced to myself, you know, throughout the course of my life. So it was easy for me to just be the shy guy, right? It was easy for me just to kind of follow along with that because that's like what I expected of myself and what others would have expected from me. But it was like, and it's been, you know, as I've kind of got older and, you know, as we kind of went through like teenage years and then like, you know, early 20s and stuff like that, definitely would still feel it like being there, still sort of seeing myself as being shy, and would struggle in like situations where like I needed to be social, especially like trying to make small talk. Always hated that. But as I've kind of got over it and kind of taken myself away from that and thought, you know what, I'm not actually shy. Like, why am I shy? I just need to like speak to people. It's gonna be fine. And then over time, it's become far easier for me to be able to do that. And like right now, I would be pretty confident to say like, I don't really see myself as being shy anymore. So I hope that kind of explains roughly what I'm trying to get at here. It's how you see yourself, and it's almost like this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like how you see yourself, you will continuously make decisions that align with that, right? And it's almost like when you're put under any sort of pressure or when you're put under any sort of stress, you will revert back to that comfort zone. And that comfort zone is like, it's what you know, it's what you're familiar with. It might not necessarily actually be what's good for you, but it's what you're used to. And you know, almost like subconsciously, right? You know you're safe there. So you will revert back to that person, that identity. So ultimately, I think that we need to make sure that we are seeing ourselves as the person that you want to become. And this doesn't have to be like a drastic change, like you're, you know, going from 0 to 100. It could just be like you want to be this slightly better person in some way, right? It doesn't even have to be just physique and performance based. It could be personally, it could be professionally. It could even just be like, the one example that's literally just popped into my head off the cuff. It's like, I don't know if anyone else gets this, right? But I'll get this, where sometimes I just feel like I'm unnecessarily occasionally rude to some people, or like, I don't know, for some reason my gut reaction will be like, just to have, if someone like cuts me off when I'm walking, for example, my gut reaction is like, oh, for fuck's sake. Whereas like, I don't know why I do that, and I could probably just come away from that. It's not really going to affect me in any other way. So it could even be something like small like that. Like maybe you have a colleague at work that for some reason they just seem to get on your nerves and you're always like a little bit cold to them, and you're like, you know what, I'm unnecessarily being a dick to that person. I should probably be a bit nicer. It could be something small like that, but it could also be obviously on a much larger scale where, you know, you're trying to come away from the type of person that, I don't know, like goes out a bit too much over the course of a week, maybe drinks a little bit more than what you actually want to, maybe gives in to temptations a little bit too often and things like that. Or maybe even like, you know, you want to change the kind of people that you hang around, or whatever it is, right? There's so many different places I think this can apply, and I think this is probably making sense. So another interesting story actually off the back of this that or it's related to this, that I heard fairly recently, that when I was putting my notes together for this episode, I thought this is a good story to tell. There was a singer, right? And there's definitely going to be facts that are wrong in this story, right? I'm not saying this is exactly true, but I think it highlights the point I'm trying to make. There was a singer who came from a family in somewhere in America, and they were a very religious family. They were, you know, very like church led, were pretty conservative, all that kind of stuff. And the girl in the family ended up becoming a singer. So she was a singer, and she was getting progressively, like over time, more and more popular until she essentially became like a huge pop star. But then actually when she was on stage doing her pop star stuff and shows, she found it very difficult to like do some of the things that she in a way needed to do, right? Because, you know, we've all seen like the kind of sex appeal that gets put into all these shows and the way that people dance and all this kind of stuff, right? And it was like difficult for her to do, especially because, you know, that just wasn't who she saw herself as, and that like how it would look, how her family would think of it and things like that. So what this singer did was she created like a second identity for herself, that when it came time to kind of go and perform and kind of be in the public eye in that way, she became this other person. And the person in this story is actually Beyonce. So like she, when she was a younger girl, was, as I say, church-led family, very conservative, to now like this completely different person. And you know, I don't know her personally, so I can't say what she's like behind closed doors, but I would probably argue that, you know, over the course of her life, she's definitely changed massively in how she sees herself, just from, you know, doing from the starting point of creating this new identity for herself and kind of acting in accordance with that identity. So I think that is just another kind of third party good example of how this can actually work for you. So ultimately what we need to do and what we're trying to do here is like recognize and reorganize. So we need to recognize that sometimes we let ourselves down, we let our identities or our mindsets get the better of us in these certain situations, and then we need to reorganize how we actually go about the change of this process, right? So I want you to imagine in your heads for a second a triangle, but then flip that triangle upside down, right? And inside this triangle is going to be 3 segments. So if you were to think of an upside down triangle, and then that bottom segment there where essentially the tip of the triangle would be, that's the identity section, right? In the middle of the triangle, if you think of a midsection there, that's going to be what we call processes. I've got this wrong, other way around. So think of it, start again. You've got your triangle, right? The tip of the triangle is facing downwards. That small section at the bottom of the triangle is going to be the outcome, right? And when I say outcomes, I'm referring to like what you actually want to work towards. And these can be more surface level. So for a lot of you guys, you know, when you first join me, it could be, I want to lose, you know, X amount of body fat. I want to look more like, you know, whatever weight. I want to get however much stronger. I want to be however much more confident. I want to fit in these clothes. Like outcomes like that, kind of tangible things that you can see a difference in, right? That's what the tip of the upside down triangle is, right? Now, one section up, that sort of midsection of the triangle, that's the processes. And when I say processes, I'm referring to the things that you need to do in order to get that outcome, right? So, you know, this is like the kind of what you need in place. Maybe if it's, you know, lose however much body fat and kind of get shredded or whatever, it's, you know, follow this training plan, eat this way, etc., etc., right? Those are the processes. And that's kind of what you guys come to me for, right? That's what I give you. I make sure that you're given the right processes and you're giving them, you know, the right ones for what your actual goals are. They're personalized to you, and to make sure you actually continuously follow through on those, right? And then essentially the top of the triangle, which in this case, because the triangle is upside down, is the widest part. So I guess you could imagine it more like a funnel, is identity, right? So a lot of people think of it in that way that I've just explained, where you want a certain outcome, you then look for the processes that help you achieve that outcome, and then because of that, over time, your identity will change to become that person, right? Which to me, still, you know, that makes logical sense. But what I want to do is actually reorganize the kind of classic way of thinking about it. So again, just to sum that up, the classic way of thinking about it is like, I want X outcome, therefore I need to do Y processes. And over time, because I do these processes, I'll get the outcomes and my identity will change. The way I see myself will change because I'll become that person, which again, it makes logical sense. But I want to flip that on its head, right? Because I think the fundamental thing is like, we need to change the identity. We need to upgrade your identity in that way, because as I've said, in stressful situations, under pressure, when you're overwhelmed, any of these kind of things, you will always revert back to that identity. So I think, right, let's start at the source and let's help you over time change that identity so that as a byproduct, you eventually get the outcome that you want. And that's to me anyway, what makes all this stuff far more sustainable. And when I say, you know, sustainable, I always feel like sustainable results is a thing that gets thrown around so much in like the fitness space. And I'm gonna do a post on this at some point as well, just saying how like sustainable results to me, I was just like, it doesn't make sense, because more often than not, people will, you know, when you're trying to achieve a certain result, especially when it's physique based stuff, like what you're doing is inherently unsustainable. And you need to make sure that as you're going through the process and once you've achieved the result, you actually spend time just learning how to maintain that. And whilst you're learning how to maintain that, that's where so much of this identity shift will happen. So that you always, no matter what the situation is, whether it's like you're feeling good or you're feeling pressured and nervous and all those other things I mentioned previously, no matter what, you revert back to this new identity. So ultimately, to me, that's what makes this sustainable. It's if you start with the identity piece, right? So essentially the processes that you go through, the things that I help you nail, they're the byproduct of you wanting to improve your identity. So the way I see it now is that you guys have come to me, yes, obviously for certain outcomes, and you've come to me, yes, for the processes to help you to achieve those outcomes, but you've ultimately come to me because you want to be the kind of person who does X, the kind of person who looks like Y, the kind of person who's able to do, the stuff they want to do without their bodies being the thing that's going to hold them back, from a physique or a performance standpoint. So it's like the processes are a byproduct of you wanting to change your identity in that way. And I basically just help you nail those processes faster. But the identity piece comes from you. And then the outcomes, the goals that you want, they're a byproduct of you nailing the processes that I give you repeatedly, right? If you consistently are doing the processes and following through with all those actions that I'm giving you, then you'll get your outcome. So now essentially what we've done is we've taken that sort of funnel triangle, if you're following me, flipped it upside down. So it's just a regular triangle. You've got identity on the bottom, processes in the middle, and then outcomes at the top, right? And if you can think of this visually, then ultimately that's a far more stable looking triangle, right? Because you've got a nice solid base, which is your identity. So no matter what happens, you will always revert back to that, and over time you've upgraded that identity. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Now, in order to help you guys with this and help you think what you need to do or not do to start kind of really working on this, I guess on more of a fundamental level, is an exercise that I gave all the guys at the training day to do. Now, guys who came along, you can redo this because I know you didn't really have that much time on the day to kind of think about it a lot, and maybe this in these circumstances are better for you to actually put this into practice a little bit more. So what I want you to do is just take a piece of paper and just draw a table on there with 4 sections. So imagine you've got an A4 piece of paper, you just draw a line right down the middle and a line across the middle as well. So you've got 4 sections. And then in one section, you're going to write, on the top, you're going to write the word start. You could also just do this as 4 separate lists if you want, if you're a list person. So you want to write in one section, start, in one section, stop, and then in the bottom 2, more in one section, and then the title of the last section will be less, right? And then what I want you to do in the start section, I want you to write 3 things that you need to start doing in order to work towards your goal at the moment, right? So these are things that you are currently not doing, but things that you know that you need to start doing to get to whatever that goal is for you, right? Now, these goals could be the outcome that you want, right, that we've mentioned previously. So what do you need to start doing? 2 to 3 things you need to start doing that you're currently not to get towards that goal, right? In the stop section, the same thing, except 3 things that you need to stop doing. So 3 things that you're definitely doing right now that you know you need to just outright stop doing to work towards that goal. And then in the more or less section, the same thing. But in the more section, we're looking for 2 to 3 things that you need to do more of. So these are maybe things that you're doing very occasionally, but definitely not enough, that you know you need to do more of. 3 in there. And then the less section is 3 things you know you need to do less of, that you don't necessarily have to cut out completely, but you know you need to do less of it. Okay, so I want you to even, like, at this point, you could even pause the episode and go and write that into those 4 sections, or write those 4 lists based off what your goal is, what you need to start doing, stop doing, what you need to do more of, and what you need to do less of in order to work towards that goal. And then once you've done that, so you can pause the episode now, and then you can come back to it. And then once you've done that, you can keep these lists, so you can keep that bit of paper that you've written on somewhere that you're going to see it pretty much every single day, all right? And I want you to understand that, like, every day and every week won't be perfect, and it shouldn't be, it shouldn't be perfect. We shouldn't be aiming for you to make every single decision in line with what this new identity is for you, right? But I want you to think of it like how you would kind of vote for different things, right? So when it comes to polling day, right, people go in and they vote for, whatever party they're going to vote for. Now, as long as, the party that wins obviously is the one with the most votes. So I want you to think of it like this, like each time you make a decision, you're just casting a vote to a certain identity of you. And as long as the right identity kind of wins over time, then you win, right? So it doesn't necessarily need to be that every single decision you make from now on needs to be, you know, in line with that new identity. It just needs to be that the majority of those decisions are in line with that identity. All right, so mistakes will happen, and that's okay. We just need to be quick to correct them and make sure that the votes balance out in the right way at the end of the day, the month, the week, the year, whatever. Okay, so just to summarize that, guys, basically I think that the best way to summarize it is, yeah, fake it till you make it. You need to start acting like the person that you want to become before you actually become that person. You just start, you know, upgrading your identity in that way. And honestly, I can't kind of urge you enough to actually have paused this episode and write down the start, stop, more or less sections, because I think actually doing that and giving yourself the chance to think about it and come up with 2 to 3 things for each of those sections and then putting it somewhere that you'll see every day is going to make the biggest difference, rather than, you know, just having, you know, thought about it, or only just having thought about it whilst you were listening. All right, anyway, that is all from me. Let me know if you guys have any questions on that. I'm looking forward to the next one, and I'll speak to you all soon.